After flying 12 hours through 3 delays to surprise my husband at his guy's cabin weekend, I walked in with his favorite bourbon, and heard him say, if she vanished that insurance money could clear my debts. His friend laughed, or finally date her sister guilt-free. I left the bourbon. By morning I was in Costa Rica. 2 weeks later his sister called, crying. The bourbon bottle felt heavy in my hands as I stood before the cabin door. My heartbeat quickened with anticipation after traveling 12 hours to surprise David. Then I heard his voice through the weathered wood, words that froze the smile on my face and shattered my world into 1,000 jagged pieces. If she vanished, that insurance money could clear my debts. My husband's voice was casual, almost thoughtful, as if discussing the weather. A burst of laughter followed, then his friend's voice, or finally date her sister guilt-free. More laughter. My fingers tightened around the bottle of Blanton's, his favorite bourbon that I'd carefully wrapped with a red ribbon. The gift I'd carried across 3 states through endless delays suddenly felt like a prop in someone else's play. I grew up surrounded by wealth. My father built his real estate empire from nothing, ensuring both my sister Amelia and I would never want for anything. When I met David at a charity fundraiser 3 years ago, he seemed refreshingly uninterested in my family's fortune. He was charming, driven, working on his MBA and full of dreams. I fell hard and fast. David needs time to establish himself, I explained to my father when he questioned why my new husband hadn't signed the prenup. He's sensitive about the money difference. I trust him. My father's concerned frown should have been my first warning. Sophia, love shouldn't require financial sacrifice. Remember that. I didn't listen. Instead, I supported David's consulting business when traditional investors wouldn't. I paid off his student loans as a first anniversary gift. I bought the house he wanted in the neighborhood he chose. Each time he claimed a setback in his business, I wrote another check, believing in the partnership I thought we were building. My sister tried warning me too in her gentle way. He asks about our family trusts a lot, sophomore. It's odd. I dismissed her concerns as overprotectiveness. He's just trying to understand our world, I'd insisted. Standing outside that cabin door, all those warnings crashed down on me at once. Yesterday had been normal. A video call with David where he talked about the cabin weekend, how the guys were playing poker and hiking. He'd mentioned missing me. I'd smiled, already knowing I would surprise him, having secretly booked my flight weeks ago. The decision to surprise him had come during one of my lonely evenings in our too-big house. 2 years of supporting his dreams while mine gathered dust. 2 years of believing his excuses when he missed dinner with my family. 2 years of ignoring how he casually mentioned my sister's accomplishments with a gleam in his eye that made me uncomfortable. Babe, I can't make it this weekend. The guy's trip is sacred, no wives allowed, he'd said last week, kissing my forehead. You understand. I did understand. I understood his need for space, for time with friends. What I didn't understand was why I always had to be the understanding one. So I decided, just once, to put my desires first. To see his face light up when I arrived unexpected. To remind him why we fell in love. The journey had been a nightmare of technical issues and weather delays. First, a mechanical problem grounded us for 2 hours in Chicago. Then thunderstorms diverted us to Indianapolis. The final flight was delayed another 3 hours due to crew scheduling issues. I'd sat in uncomfortable airport chairs, checked my watch constantly, and clutched my carry-on containing the $200 bourbon I'd specially ordered. A woman next to me at the last gate had noticed my agitation. Someone special waiting? My husband, I'd replied, smiling despite my exhaustion. He has no idea I'm coming. Those are the best surprises, she'd said, patting my hand. Through it all, I'd clung to the image of David's surprised face, imagining his arms wrapping around me, telling his friends, "See what an amazing wife I have?" Now I stood paralyzed outside the wooden door of cabin number 8, the revelation still ringing in my ears. How much is the policy for again? David's friend asked. $2 million. Took some convincing to get her to sign the papers. Told her it was about our future family. I pressed my hand against my mouth to stifle any sound. My legs trembled but somehow held me upright. "Dude, that's cold," another voice said, though he was chuckling. "Cold? It's strategic," David replied. "Her dad's worth 9 figures. Her sister's single and a lot more fun. Sophia's sweet but boring." always worried about disappointing Daddy. Something inside me, something that had been bending for 2 years, finally broke. A memory surfaced. David casually suggesting we go skydiving, mountain climbing, scuba diving, all activities that could end tragically. I thought he was being adventurous. Now I understood. He was looking for accidents to happen. The bourbon bottle nearly slipped from my grasp. I set it down silently by the door, carefully removing the gift tag with my name. My wedding ring caught the porch light, its diamonds suddenly seeming gaudy and false, just like our marriage. I backed away from the door, my designer suitcase forgotten beside the bourbon. Through the cabin window I caught a glimpse of them. David and 3 friends, cards and cash on the table, beers in hand. My husband was smiling, completely at ease while discussing my death. This man who kissed me goodbye at the airport 3 days ago. This man who promised to love me through sickness and health. This man who had access to every account, every asset I owned. My wedding ring felt like it was burning into my skin. I twisted it off as I walked back to my rental car, my mind racing through all the signs I'd ignored. The questions about my life insurance. The subtle distancing from my friends and family. The accidental meetings with my sister. As I slid into the driver's seat, I placed my wedding ring in the cup holder. A small, glittering testament to a marriage built on lies. For a brief moment, I considered confronting him, imagined the satisfaction of seeing his face when he realized he'd been caught. But self-preservation won out. If he was willing to contemplate my death for money, what else might he do when cornered? I started the engine and pulled away from the cabin that held the ruins of my marriage, tears finally breaking free. But beneath the devastation, something else was forming. A cold, clear determination. By morning, I would be in Costa Rica. By the time David returned home, I would be officially missing. Let him sweat. Let him wonder. Let him face those debt collectors alone. I may have been raised with wealth and privilege, but my father also taught me something David had clearly forgotten. Never underestimate a woman with resources and a reason for revenge. My hands didn't shake as I sat in my rental car in the dimly lit parking lot a mile from the cabin. That surprised me. The numbness had settled in, wrapping around me like a protective shield. I pulled out my phone and opened the airline app. One-way ticket. Furthest place I could think of on short notice. Costa Rica. Confirmation email arrived seconds later. No hesitation, no second thoughts. I drove to the nearest 24-hour pharmacy, purchased a prepaid phone and activated it in the parking lot. Then I called my assistant. Megan, I need you to do something for me, no questions asked. Of course, Ms. Reynolds. Is everything all right? I'm taking an extended personal trip. Emergency. I need you to cancel all my appointments for the next month. If anyone asks, including David, you haven't heard from me since yesterday. Pause. Should I be worried about you? No, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. I just need time. I'll contact you when I can. I hung up and removed the battery from my regular phone. David could track that one. The rental car GPS could be tracked too. I returned it to the airport and took a rideshare to a different airport in the next state over. Every decision calculated, mechanical. As if someone else was moving my body while I watched from a distance. The red-eye flight was half empty. As the plane lifted into the darkness, memories flickered through my mind like an old slideshow, recontextualizing themselves in the harsh light of tonight's revelation. David commenting on my sister's dress at Christmas dinner. Amelia always had great taste. The way his eyes lingered. His suggestion that I change my will after we married. It's what responsible couples do. The hiking trip where he insisted on taking photos of me near cliff edges. Just step back a little more, honey. The swimming accident last summer, when I'd nearly drowned after he'd convinced me to swim further from shore than I was comfortable with. You're stronger than you think, he'd said, then somehow wasn't nearby when I started struggling. His casual dismissal of my fertility concerns. We have plenty of time for kids. Let's enjoy being just us for now. Was he waiting for the insurance policy to clear? The pieces assembled themselves into a horrifying mosaic. I wasn't a wife to him. I was a walking bank account with an expiration date of his choosing. The flight attendant touched my shoulder, startling me. Ma'am? Would you like some water? I realized I'd been silently crying. 16 hours and 3 flights later, I emerged into the humid Costa Rican air. My hastily packed suitcase contained 3 outfits, basic toiletries, my passport, and an envelope with $5,000 in cash that I kept for emergencies. I'd withdrawn another $10,000 from an ATM at my layover, maxing out the daily limit. My credit cards remained untouched, those could be traced. The taxi driver didn't speak much English, which suited me fine. I showed him the name of a small hotel I'd found online during my layover. Not a resort, nothing luxury. Nothing David would ever think to look for me in. Playa Hermosa, he nodded, pulling away from the airport. Through the window, lush greenery and colorful buildings blurred together. I was 3,000 miles from home, from the life I'd built, from the husband who'd been plotting my death. My wedding ring finger felt naked, the tan lines stark against my skin. The hotel, Posada del Mar, sat on a quiet stretch of beach, its weathered blue paint peeling in the salt air. The lobby consisted of a small front desk and a few rattan chairs. A ceiling fan turned lazily overhead. The older woman at the desk smiled warmly. Reservation? No, I hesitated. Do you have any rooms available? For a few weeks. She assessed me, disheveled, exhausted, eyes swollen from silent tears. Whatever she saw made her nod gently. We have a room with ocean view. Very peaceful. When she pushed the registration card toward me, I hesitated only briefly before writing Sophia Reynolds, my maiden name. A name I hadn't used in 2 years. A name that felt both foreign and like coming home. Just you, Senora Reynolds? Yes. Just me. On vacation? I paused, unsure how to answer. Starting over. Something in her eyes softened with understanding. She handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a key card. Room 8. Up the stairs, end of walkway. Very private. The irony of another room 8 wasn't lost on me. I'd stood outside one cabin door and lost everything. Now I was entering another room 8 to begin again. The room was simple. White walls, tile floor, a queen bed with a blue coverlet, and double doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the ocean. The bathroom had a shower with inconsistent water pressure. No air conditioning, just a ceiling fan. Nothing like the luxury hotels David and I usually stayed in. It was perfect. I dropped my suitcase and walked to the balcony. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Waves crashed rhythmically against the shore. For the first time since hearing those devastating words, I took a deep breath. Night fell quickly in Costa Rica. I lay on the unfamiliar bed in the darkness, listening to the ocean and the unfamiliar sounds of night creatures. Reality began to crack through my protective numbness. My chest tightened. My breathing became shallow. Everything I'd been holding back crashed through. I curled into myself, sobs racking my body, muffled by the pillow I clutched against my face. I cried for the woman who had loved so blindly. For the future I thought I had. For the betrayal so deep I couldn't fathom its edges. He wanted me dead, I whispered into the darkness, the words making it real. The tears continued until there were no more left, leaving me hollow and spent. I dragged myself to the bathroom, splashed water on my face and caught my reflection in the spotted mirror. I hardly recognized myself. The woman staring back had shadows under her eyes and a hardness to her mouth that hadn't been there before. I returned to the bed and lay awake as the night hours crawled by. The ceiling fan created moving shadows across the walls. Somewhere nearby, music played faintly, then quieted. The ocean continued its endless conversation with the shore. As the first light of dawn crept through the thin curtains, I moved to the balcony and watched the sun emerge from the horizon, painting the water gold. Birds called to each other in the nearby trees. The world was continuing as if everything was normal. As if my life hadn't just imploded. I'd left everything behind. My home, my clothes, my identity as David's wife. All I had was myself. And for the first time in years I wondered if that might be enough. A knock on the door startled me. The hotel owner stood there with a tray, coffee, fresh fruit and toast. On the house, she said simply. First day is always the hardest. As she turned to leave, I found my voice. How did you know? She gave me a gentle smile. You're not the first woman to wash up on our shore looking for a new start, Senora. You won't be the last. After she left, I sipped the strong coffee and watched the beach come to life below. Locals walked their dogs. A fisherman pushed his boat into the surf. None of them knew me. None of them had expectations. For the first time since I'd heard those devastating words through the cabin door, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. For the first time since I'd heard those devastating words through the cabin door, I felt something other than pain. I felt possibility. Those words became my mantra over the next few days. I repeated them to myself each morning as I watched the sun rise from my balcony, coffee in hand, a ritual Sophia, the hotel owner, had established without asking. She'd appear at my door each morning, tray in hand, gentle smile on her weathered face. On my third day, when I tried to pay her for the daily breakfast service, she waved away my money. "First you heal, then we talk business," she said firmly. That afternoon she knocked on my door again. "Come, walk with me." I hesitated, but something in her motherly authority made me follow. We strolled along the shoreline, her sandaled feet leaving perfect impressions in the wet sand. "My husband left me for my cousin 20 years ago," she said without preamble. "I wanted to die. Dad, I bought this hotel. Sometimes the best revenge is simply living well." I stopped walking. "How did you know?" Sophia smiled. "Your eyes. They have the look of a woman betrayed. Different details, same pain." She gestured to the horizon. "Costa Rica has a way of rebuilding broken people." That evening I sat on my balcony watching tourists laughing on the beach below, couples holding hands, families building sandcastles, and felt a sudden, overwhelming isolation. I'd spent 3 days hiding in my room, nursing wounds no one could see. But what was I hiding from? David didn't know where I was. No one did. The next morning I ventured out before Sophia's breakfast delivery. The sand felt cool beneath my feet as I walked along the shoreline, watching the sky transition from navy to pink to brilliant blue. A local vendor was setting up his fruit stand, arranging mangoes and pineapples in colorful patterns. "Buenos dias," he called, waving me over. He sliced a piece of mango and handed it to me. The sweetness exploded in my mouth, a reminder that pleasure still existed in this world. This became another ritual. Morning walks, fresh fruit, exchanged smiles with locals who asked nothing of me. Each day I ventured a little further from the hotel. Each day the weight on my chest lightened fractionally. A week into my self-imposed exile, I passed a small salon tucked between a souvenir shop and a cafe. Through the window I caught my reflection, long hair pulled back in my signature neat ponytail. David had always loved my hair, called it my crown. He'd complain whenever I suggested cutting it. Before I could reconsider, I walked into the salon. The stylist, a young woman with vibrant blue streaks in her dark hair, looked up and smiled. "Can I help you?" "I want it all gone," I said, pulling the elastic from my ponytail and letting my hair fall around my shoulders. "Short. Different. Not me, at least not the old me." She studied my face, then nodded. "I know exactly what you need." I closed my eyes as she worked, the snip of scissors oddly comforting. When she finally turned my chair toward the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My hair now fell in choppy layers that framed my face, highlighting cheekbones I'd forgotten I had. I looked younger. "Freer. Beautiful," the stylist said, satisfaction in her voice. I touched the ends of my hair. "Yes," I agreed. "It is." From the salon I walked to a small boutique selling locally made clothing. I purchased flowing linen pants, colorful cotton tops, comfortable sandals. Nothing like the designer labels that filled my closet at home. I threw away the clothes I'd packed, keeping only the practical items. The woman I'd been, the one who wore silk blouses and tailored slacks, who coordinated her accessories with precision, seemed like a stranger now. That evening, Sophia nodded approvingly at my transformation. "Now you look like you belong here." "I'm starting to feel like I do," I admitted. 2 days later, wandering through a quiet side street, I discovered a small art gallery. Paintings of local landscapes filled the walls. Vibrant, emotional interpretations of beaches and jungles that captured something beyond mere appearance. An elderly man sat in the corner, sketching. "You like art?" he asked in accented English, noticing my interest. "I used to paint," I replied. "Years ago. Before David. Before I set aside my creative pursuits to support his dreams. Before I became the perfect corporate wife." The man, Miguel, I later learned, handed me his sketchbook and a pencil. "Show me." I hesitated, then sat beside him. My first strokes were tentative, but soon my hand remembered what my mind had forgotten. The curve of the coastline, the texture of palm fronds, the play of light on water. I lost track of time, lost in the simple joy of creation. "You have talent," Miguel said when I finally looked up. "Come back tomorrow. I teach you more." I did go back, day after day. The small gallery became my sanctuary. Miguel taught me new techniques, introduced me to local artists, encouraged me to experiment. I started with pencil sketches, then moved to watercolors, then acrylics. Each medium unlocked something that had been dormant inside me. "Your work has sadness," Miguel observed after a few weeks. "But also strength. This is good. Art should tell truth." 3 weeks into my stay, I finally accessed my email through the hotel's public computer. Over 200 messages awaited me, increasingly frantic ones from David, concerned ones from friends, a few from my sister wondering why I wasn't responding to her texts. The most recent from David was addressed to the police, copied to me, reporting me as a missing person, describing me as emotionally fragile and possibly suicidal. My hands trembled as I logged into our joint bank account, the one where my monthly allowance from my trust fund was deposited. The balance was zero. Every penny transferred to an account I didn't recognize 2 days after I disappeared. My separate personal account, the one David didn't know about, remained untouched. I sat back staring at the screen. He was already collecting, assuming I was dead or as good as. The insurance policy wouldn't pay out yet, but he'd taken what he could reach. The final confirmation of his betrayal should have devastated me. Instead, it hardened my resolve. That evening, as I sat on my balcony with a glass of local wine, Sophia joined me. We watched the sunset in companionable silence before she spoke. "You look different today." "Decision made." I nodded. "I think it's time to stop running and start fighting back." Sophia raised her glass. "To phoenixes then. Rising from ashes." I clinked my glass against hers. The woman who had arrived at Posada del Mar, broken, betrayed, lost, was gone. In her place sat someone stronger. Someone with a plan. I clinked my glass against Sophia's. "To phoenixes then. Rising from ashes." The plan was still forming, nebulous but strengthening. Over the next few days I began making notes, researching legal options, contacting my personal attorney through an encrypted email service. I was careful, methodical, the way my father had taught me to be with business decisions. This was, after all, the most important negotiation of my life. That afternoon I was dozing in the hammock on my balcony, lulled by the rhythmic sound of waves, when an unfamiliar ringtone startled me awake. For a moment I was disoriented. It wasn't my phone ringing. Then I remembered the prepaid phone I'd purchased nearly 2 weeks ago, the one I'd given the number to exactly one person. Megan, my assistant. I fumbled for it, heart suddenly racing. "Hello. Ms. Reynolds." Megan's voice was low, urgent. "I'm so sorry to disturb you, but there's someone needs to speak with you. It's important." Before I could respond, there was rustling, then a new voice came on the line. Shaky, tear-filled, but immediately recognizable. "Sophia? Oh my God, you're alive. Thank God. I didn't know who else to call. Your assistant wouldn't tell me anything, but I begged her." Rebecca. David's sister. My sister-in-law. The woman who'd been my friend long before she became my family. "How did you get this number?" "I've been calling everyone trying to find you. David said you disappeared, that you might have hurt yourself." Her voice broke. "But I knew, I hoped." I sat up straight, instantly alert. "Rebecca, slow down. What's happening?" A sob escaped her. "There are men at David's house, our house. Dangerous men. They say he owes them money. A lot of money. They threatened him, Sophia. They threatened me." My stomach tightened. "What kind of men?" "The kind who break things. Fingers. Faces." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They gave him 3 days to pay or they'll make an example of him. They know about me, about my house. They said if he runs, they'll take my house instead." My mind raced. Rebecca owned a small, charming craftsman she'd purchased with her teacher's salary and a loan from their parents. She'd renovated it herself, painted every wall, planted every flower in the garden. It was her pride, her sanctuary. "How much does he owe?" I asked, already dreading the answer. $300,000, she whispered. "Gambling debts. I had no idea it was this bad, Sophia. None of us did." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The desperate need for my insurance money. The attempts to access my trust fund. The constant financial setbacks in his business. Not business losses at all, but gambling debt. When did this start? I don't know exactly. He's always liked to bet on games, but the men said he's been building this debt for over a year. High-stakes poker, sports betting, even some underground casino. She paused. He kept asking to borrow against my house 2 months ago. I said no. Now I understand why. I closed my eyes, remembering the weekend trips with clients, the late nights at business dinners, the mysterious calls he'd take in another room. All those lies. Where is he now? Drinking himself stupid at his place. Sophia, he's a mess. You disappearing broke him. The police suspect him in your disappearance, did you know that? And now these men. I'm scared for him. The irony was almost too much. The husband who'd contemplated my death for financial gain was now being investigated for my disappearance. Under different circumstances, it might have seemed like perfect justice. Why are you calling me, Rebecca? I kept my voice steady, though my hands were shaking. What do you expect me to do? She hesitated. I thought, if you came back, explain to the police that you just needed time away. And maybe with your family's connections, the money. You want me to pay his gambling debts. It wasn't a question. I know it's asking a lot. But they'll hurt him, Sophia. Maybe worse. And I'll lose my house. Everything I've worked for. Rebecca, always the protector of her younger brother. Always making excuses for him. Always cleaning up his messes. I'd admired that loyalty once. Now it just made me sad. Does he know you're calling me? No. He thinks you're. She couldn't finish the sentence. Dead. My husband hoped, I was dead. And his sister was asking me to rescue him from the consequences of his actions. I need time to think, I said finally. I'll call you back on this number. I hung up before she could respond and immediately called Megan back. How did she find you? I demanded. She showed up at the office hysterical, saying it was life or death. I'm so sorry. It's okay, I sighed. Just, no one else understood? Not even if they're crying. After hanging up, I walked to the beach, mind churning. The smart move was to stay hidden, let David face the consequences of his actions. Let him experience what it felt like to be desperate, afraid, alone. The debt collectors weren't my problem. His gambling addiction wasn't my problem. Her house wasn't my problem. But Rebecca had been my friend. She'd welcomed me into their family when my own was skeptical of David. She'd defended me when her mother made snippy comments about my wealthy upbringing. She'd been genuine in her affection, unlike her brother. I picked up a stone and hurled it into the ocean, watching it disappear beneath the waves. The choice before me wasn't just about David. It was about what kind of person I wanted to be in this new life I was building. The woman who fled in the night was justified in her self-preservation. But the woman I was becoming, stronger, clearer, more purposeful, she needed to make decisions she could live with. I returned to my room and called my attorney. After explaining the situation, I asked a single question. Can I pay someone else's debt without revealing my location or current status? There was a long pause. It's possible. Complicated, but possible. 2 hours and several calls later, I had my answer. I called Rebecca back. I'll handle the debt, I said without preamble. But there are conditions. Her breath caught. Anything. First, David never knows the money came from me. As far as he's concerned, I'm still missing. But the police. I've arranged for evidence of my international travels to be discovered. The investigation will shift from homicide to a missing person who doesn't want to be found. Second, you get David into rehab for his gambling. Real rehab, not a weekend program. Of course. Yes. And third, I continued, you sell your house and move. Somewhere he doesn't know about. Somewhere safer. Silence stretched between us. You think he'd hurt me? I thought of the cabin, his casual discussion of my death. I think a desperate man is unpredictable. And David is very desperate right now. After another long pause, she agreed. Before hanging up, she asked the question I'd been dreading. Sophia, what happened? Why did you leave like that? I closed my eyes, debating how much to tell her. Let's just say I overheard something that made me realize our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. Something unforgivable. Another long silence. Was it about me? My breath caught. What do you mean? David, he's always had this idea that you and I, that we. She couldn't finish. That you and I what, Rebecca? That we should be together. That I had feelings for you. Her voice was barely audible. It's why his last girlfriend left. He kept comparing her to you, then suggesting that we. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. His friend's voice echoed in my memory. Or finally date her sister guilt-free. Not my sister. His sister. Rebecca, I said carefully, what exactly did David tell you about me? Rebecca, I said carefully, what exactly did David tell you about me? The line went silent for so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally her voice returned, small and uncertain. That you were unstable. That you had episodes. That you sometimes confused reality with fantasy. She paused. He said you accused him of things he never did, that you had paranoid thoughts about him wanting your money. A cold fury settled in my chest, so intense it felt like ice spreading through my veins. Not only had he planned my death, but he'd been laying groundwork to discredit me, painting me as mentally unstable to his own sister. I'm going to help you, Rebecca, I said, my voice steadier than I'd expected. But after this is done, we need to have a longer conversation about your brother. After arranging for the debt payment through my attorney, I made another call to Carlos Mendez, a private investigator my father had used for corporate matters. I'd met him several times at company events and trusted his discretion. I need everything, I told him after explaining my situation. Financial records, phone logs, emails, text messages. I need to know exactly what I was married to. This is going to get ugly, Carlos warned. Are you sure you want to see it all? I need to, I replied. For closure, yes. But also for protection. The next 3 days were the longest of my life. I continued my daily rituals. Morning walks, art lessons with Miguel, meals with Sophia. But my mind was elsewhere, spinning through possibilities, planning contingencies. The shock of David's betrayal had crystallized into something harder, more tactical. Carlos's first report arrived via encrypted email on the 4th day. I sat on my balcony with my laptop, took a deep breath and opened the file. The evidence was methodical, devastating, and far worse than I'd imagined. 3 months after we married, David had taken out an additional life insurance policy on me, one I'd never seen or signed for. The signature on the documents was a passable forgery of my own. The beneficiary was listed as David, naturally. The payout, $5 million. I stared at the scanned documents, remembering the weekend David had insisted I try skydiving despite my fear of heights. The boating trip where he'd encouraged me to go out alone despite the approaching storm. The hiking trail where he'd suggested I pose near the cliff edge for the perfect photo. All potential accidents. All with witnesses who would testify to his concern, his warnings that I was being too reckless. I moved to the next set of files. Phone records. Hundreds of texts between David and my sister Amelia over the past 8 months. Most were innocuous on the surface. Questions about my schedule, comments about family gatherings. But the undertone was clear once you knew to look for it. He was testing waters, gauging her interest, making subtle suggestions. Amelia's responses were polite but distant. When he grew more explicit in his flirtations, she began responding less frequently. The last exchange was from 3 weeks ago. David, we need to talk privately. I have concerns about Sophia that I can only share with you. Amelia, if you're worried about my sister, talk to her directly. Or seek professional help. I'm not comfortable with these conversations anymore. I closed my eyes, a wave of gratitude washing over me. Amelia had sensed something off and created distance. She hadn't encouraged him. Hadn't reciprocated. The relief was so intense it brought tears to my eyes. The financial records were next, and they told a story of calculated deception. While claiming his business was struggling, David had maintained a secret credit card I knew nothing about. The statements showed purchases at luxury retailers, high-end restaurants, expensive hotels, none of which had been with me. There were charges from jewelry stores on significant dates. My birthday, our anniversary, Christmas. Gifts I'd never received. For other women. For gambling debts. The purpose wasn't clear, but the deception was. Most damning was evidence of an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, opened 6 months after our wedding. Regular transfers from our joint account. Money I'd provided for business expenses and investments had been funneled there instead. The current balance, $1.2 million. My money hidden away for his eventual escape. All while he insisted we needed to budget carefully for our future. All while I'd scaled back my own spending to support what I thought was our shared dream. The final document was a draft email found in David's deleted folder, addressed to my father's attorney. In it, he inquired about the conditions of my trust fund in the event of my death, specifically whether he would have control of the assets as my spouse. The email was dated 3 weeks ago, just before his cabin trip. I closed the laptop, walked to the bathroom, and was violently ill. When the nausea passed, I sat on the cool tile floor back against the wall, and allowed myself to feel the full impact of what I'd discovered. This wasn't just opportunistic betrayal. This was calculated, long-term deception. This was a man who had married me for my money and was actively plotting my death. A knock at my door startled me. Sophia stood there, concern etched on her face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. I tried to smile but failed. Just learning the truth about someone I thought I knew. She sat beside me on the bed as I summarized what Carlos had found. With each revelation, her expression darkened. "Men like this," she said finally, "they never face consequences. They slip away, find new victims, start again." "Not this time," I said, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. "This time there will be consequences." That evening I emailed Carlos with new instructions. Gather everything, organize it into irrefutable evidence, and prepare to deliver it to the appropriate authorities. I also asked him to quietly contact Rebecca, to ensure she was safe and following through on her promise to seek help for David. His response came within the hour. "Rebecca has moved to her friend's house. David doesn't know where. He's accepted the anonymous family friend explanation for the debt payment. He's also drinking heavily and making threats about finding you." I forwarded everything to my attorney with clear instructions. Prepare for war but wait for my signal. Then I opened a new document and began typing. A detailed account of my marriage, the overheard conversation at the cabin, my escape, and everything I'd discovered since. If anything happened to me, this would be my testimony. As I wrote late into the night, a plan began to form. Not just for protection, not just for justice, but for a reckoning. David had spent years creating an elaborate fiction. It was time to reveal the author behind the mask. As I wrote late into the night, a plan began to form. Not just for protection, not just for justice, but for a reckoning. David had spent years creating an elaborate fiction. It was time to reveal the author behind the mask. The preparation took another week. I needed everything to be perfectly timed, every contingency planned for. This wasn't about revenge, a hot, impulsive action fueled by hurt. This was about justice, cold, deliberate, and complete. First, I consolidated my financial position. With Carlos's help, I transferred remaining funds from joint accounts into secure ones David couldn't access. I contacted credit card companies to flag suspicious activity, backdating the requests to before my disappearance. I had my attorney draft an emergency petition to freeze the offshore account, ready to file at the right moment. Next came the legal preparations. I organized every piece of evidence into a comprehensive file. The forged insurance documents, the unauthorized policy increases, the financial fraud, the offshore accounts. Each transgression methodically documented, each connection clearly drawn. I had Carlos make multiple copies, stored in different secure locations. My appearance needed to change further. The haircut was a start, but not enough. I didn't want to be recognized before I was ready. I bought contact lenses that changed my eye color from blue to brown. I selected clothing nothing like what David was used to seeing me wear, practical, understated pieces in muted colors. I practiced a slight accent, just enough to make someone second-guess if I was who they thought I was. I booked my return flight under my maiden name with a layover route that would make my movements difficult to track. I arranged for a rental car from a small local agency that didn't require scanning ID into a computer system. The night before my departure, Sophia knocked on my door with a small package. "For protection," she said, handing me a delicate silver charm bracelet. "My grandmother gave it to me when my husband left. She said it keeps you strong when facing those who wish you harm." I slipped it onto my wrist, touched by the gesture. "I hope you find what you're looking for," she said, embracing me. "Peace, justice, whatever it is." "Thank you," I whispered. For everything. Before leaving Costa Rica, I made the hardest call of all, to my sister Amelia. I used an encrypted messaging app, one I knew she kept for her international humanitarian work. Don't react, I said the moment she answered. It's Sophia. I'm alive. I'm safe. There was a sharp intake of breath, but she followed my instruction. I'm alone, she said quietly. What's happening? Everyone thinks. I know what everyone thinks. I needed to stay that way for a little longer. I paused. I need to ask you something about David. I could hear her shifting position, could picture her moving to a more private location in her apartment. What about him? Has he been contacting you since I disappeared? Asking strange questions? Making inappropriate suggestions? Her silence was answer enough. Amelia, please. I need to know everything. He calls almost daily, she admitted. At first it seemed like genuine concern about you. Then, the tone changed. He started suggesting that maybe I needed comfort during this difficult time. That we should meet privately to share our grief. My stomach churned. Did you? God, no. Her voice was fierce. Sophia, I always thought he was off somehow. Too perfect. Too rehearsed. I never understood what you saw in him. Tears pricked my eyes. If only I'd listened to her subtle warnings years ago. There's something else, she continued hesitantly. He asked me about your trust fund. Specific questions about what happens to it if they declare you dead. I need you to do something for me, I said. It's important that you act normally around him. Don't let him suspect anything. What's going on? Where are you? I can't tell you everything yet, but I will. I promise. For now, I need you to trust me. After a moment she agreed. My final preparatory step was ensuring Rebecca's safety. I had Carlos arrange for a security detail to monitor her new location discreetly. I also established an emergency fund for her through my attorney, accessible if needed. She was another of David's victims, manipulated and used in his schemes. She deserved protection. The day before my flight home, I made an anonymous call to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. I didn't provide details, just enough information to prompt them to look closer at David's activities. The insurance fraud, the offshore accounts, the identity theft. All federal crimes. They wouldn't move immediately, but they would begin watching. The flight back to the States felt surreal. 3.5 weeks had passed since I'd overheard those fateful words at the cabin. In that time I'd died and been reborn. The naive, trusting woman replaced by someone stronger, clearer, and far more dangerous to David's plans. I arrived at night, driving my nondescript rental car through familiar streets that somehow felt foreign. The neighborhoods hadn't changed, I had. As I approached our gated community, I didn't use the main entrance where security might recognize me. Instead, I used the service road I'd discovered years ago when I'd accidentally locked myself out during a morning run. Our house, a sprawling Tudor-style home with manicured gardens and dramatic lighting, looked exactly as I'd left it. Lights glowed warmly in the downstairs windows. David was home. I parked a block away and walked the perimeter of our property, staying in shadows. Through the living room window I could see him, pacing, phone to his ear, gesturing angrily. Even at a distance I could tell he was disheveled, unshaven. The perfect, polished husband was unraveling. I didn't approach the house yet. Instead I checked into a small hotel under my new identity. Tomorrow would come soon enough. Tomorrow, when the debt collectors were scheduled to return, expecting the next payment. Tomorrow, when David would discover that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse. In my hotel room I laid out everything I would need for the confrontation. The evidence files, the legal documents, the digital recordings. I charged my devices and prepared the small audio recorder I would keep in my pocket. I slept surprisingly well that night, dreamless and deep. When I woke I didn't feel fear or anxiety, just a calm certainty. I dressed carefully in clothes that gave nothing away, applied minimal makeup, and wore the silver charm bracelet Sophia had given me. As the sun set I drove back to our neighborhood. This time I didn't hide in shadows. I walked directly up our curved driveway, past the fountain that had been David's insistence, toward the massive front door with its decorative leaded glass. I didn't use my key. I didn't belong to this house anymore. Instead I rang the doorbell and waited, standing tall and unafraid as footsteps approached from inside. I didn't use my key. I didn't belong to this house anymore. Instead, I rang the doorbell and waited, standing tall and unafraid as footsteps approached from inside. The door swung open. David stood there, unshaven, hair disheveled, wearing the same Columbia Business School sweatshirt he'd had since we met. For a split second he didn't recognize me. The new hair, the contacts, the different clothes. Then his eyes widened in disbelief. "Sophia?" he whispered, his face draining of color as though he'd seen a ghost. In a way he had. I stepped forward, not waiting for an invitation. "We need to talk." He backed away automatically, his mouth opening and closing without words. I walked past him into the foyer, the marble floor echoing under my steps. The house smelled stale, unwashed dishes, day-old takeout containers, the faint scent of whiskey. "You're alive," he finally managed, following me into the living room. "Where have you been?" "I've been out of my mind with worry. The police thought that you killed me?" I turned to face him, my voice steady. "Yes, I imagine that was inconvenient for your plans." His expression shifted rapidly, shock giving way to tentative relief, then wariness. "What are you talking about? I've been searching everywhere for you." He moved toward me, arms outstretched as if for an embrace. "Baby, I thought I'd lost you." I stepped back. Don't even try." The calculated charm appeared then, the expression I'd fallen for countless times. The furrowed brow of concern, the soft, hurt eyes, the slight tremble in his voice. "Sophia, whatever you think happened, whatever you're upset about, let me explain. I was at the cabin, David." I watched his face carefully as understanding dawned. "I heard everything." His expression froze, then rearranged itself into wounded confusion. "The cabin? What are you talking about?" "I flew 12 hours through 3 delays to surprise you. I brought your favorite bourbon. I stood outside the door and heard you discussing how my insurance money would clear your debts." He paled further but recovered quickly. "You misunderstood. It was a joke, dark humor between friends. You know how guys talk. And your friend's comment about dating my sister guilt-free if I vanished? Was that a joke too?" "Not your sister," he corrected automatically, then caught himself. "I mean, we weren't." "Your sister," I finished for him. "Yes, Rebecca told me about your little obsession. About how you've been trying to manipulate her too." Anger flashed across his face, quickly suppressed. "Rebecca? You've spoken to her? Where have you been?" "That's not important." I set my purse on the coffee table and removed a thick manila envelope. "What matters is what happens next." His eyes fixed on the envelope. "What is that?" "Everything." I opened it and began laying documents on the table between us. "The life insurance policy you forged my signature on. Bank statements showing transfers to your offshore account in the Caymans. Credit card statements for purchases I never saw. Records of your gambling debts." With each document his face grew harder, the pretense of confusion falling away. "You've been investigating me?" His voice was low, dangerous. "Just discovering who I was really married to." I laid down the final document, divorce papers already signed by me. "Your choice now is simple. Sign these and walk away with what you came into this marriage with. Nothing. Or don't, and I take everything to the FBI, the insurance company, and the district attorney." He stared at me, calculation replacing shock. I could almost see him weighing options, looking for leverage for escape routes. "You'd get nothing," he finally said. "No one would believe you. You've been missing for weeks, acting erratically. I've documented your unstable behavior for months. Your paranoid accusations, your mood swings. You mean the groundwork you were laying? Telling people I was unstable, that I confused fantasy with reality." I smiled thinly. "Rebecca told me all about it." His expression darkened. "You think you're so clever. You and your family looking down on me from the beginning. You have no proof of anything." "Actually, I do." I pulled out my phone and played a recording, his conversation with the insurance agent, requesting an increase in my policy without my knowledge. The agent's concerned questions. David's smooth lies. The doorbell rang before he could respond. I checked my watch. Right on time. "That would be your sister," I said. Rage contorted his features. "You involved her in this? After everything I've done for her? You mean like using her house as collateral for your gambling debts?" Or manipulating her emotions all these years? I moved to the door. She deserves the truth too. Rebecca stood on the porch, her expression a mixture of nervousness and determination. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her, dark circles shadowing her eyes. When she saw me, she exhaled sharply. "You came back," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "I promised I would." I led her inside to where David stood, tension radiating from him like heat. "You two planned this?" he demanded, looking between us. "My own sister betraying me?" Rebecca squared her shoulders. "No one betrayed you, David. You did this to yourself." I gestured to the paperwork spread across the table. "Rebecca has seen everything, David. She knows about the insurance fraud, the debts, your plans for me. She knows how you used her too. I would never have let them take your house," he said to her, his voice softening. "You know I'd never hurt you." Rebecca's laugh was hollow. "You've been hurting me my entire life. Making me responsible for your happiness, your problems, your mistakes. No more." David's charm made one last attempt. He stepped toward me, eyes softening. "Sophia, please. Whatever mistakes I've made, we can work through them. I love you. I've always loved you." I felt nothing. No anger, no hurt, no longing for what might have been. Just clarity. "Sign the papers, David," I said quietly. "Or the police get copies of everything tomorrow morning." Something in my voice must have convinced him. He knew he was cornered. With a shaking hand, he signed each page I indicated. "What happens now?" he asked, suddenly looking smaller, diminished. "Now you get what most people in your situation never receive: a second chance. The divorce gives you 30 days to leave the state. The debt to those men has been paid. Your criminal activities remain between us, as long as you never contact me, Rebecca, or my family again." Rebecca touched my arm. "Are you sure about this? After everything he did?" I nodded. "I don't need revenge. I need closure." I gathered the signed papers and the evidence, returning them to my bag. David watched, silent now, defeat evident in the slump of his shoulders. At the door, I turned back one last time. "The debt collectors won't return tomorrow. But federal agents might if you make one wrong move. Remember that." Rebecca and I walked out together, down the curved driveway past the pretentious fountain, through the wrought iron gates that had once represented security but now felt like a prison escaped. Neither of us looked back. In my rental car, Rebecca finally broke the silence. "What will you do now?" I touched Sophia's charm bracelet, thinking of the small hotel in Costa Rica, of Miguel's art studio, of the peaceful mornings watching the sunrise over an endless horizon. "Live," I said simply. "On my own terms. No more dimming my light for anyone." As we drove away, I felt the last chains of my old life falling away. David had wanted my death, but instead he'd given me rebirth. He'd desired my fortune, but I'd reclaimed something far more valuable: my sense of self, my power, my freedom. The road ahead stretched before me, full of possibilities I'd once been afraid to imagine. For the first time in years, I couldn't wait to discover where it would lead. 3 months later, I stood on the deck of my new beachfront studio in Costa Rica, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. My latest painting, a woman walking away from shattered glass, sat drying on an easel. Sophia appeared with 2 glasses of wine. "Your gallery showing next week is already sold out," she said, handing me a glass. "Miguel says you're his most talented student in 20 years. I smiled, thinking of how far I'd come since that night at the cabin. Rebecca had moved to Colorado, using part of the fund I'd established to open a small bookstore she'd always dreamed of. My sister Amelia had visited last month, finally meeting the real me, not the perfect corporate wife, but the artist with paint-stained hands and sun-streaked hair. As for David, I'd heard through my attorney that he'd left the country after the FBI began investigating his financials. The insurance company had launched their own fraud investigation. His carefully constructed world had collapsed like a house of cards. I took a sip of wine, feeling the warm breeze against my skin. "You know what the strange thing is? I should thank him." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "If I hadn't overheard him that night, I might have spent my entire life being who he wanted me to be instead of discovering who I really am." "To unexpected blessings," Sophia said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. "And to bourbon left behind." We stood in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky, and I felt something I hadn't known in years: The quiet contentment of being exactly where I was supposed to be, exactly who I was meant to be. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't making someone pay for what they've done. It's refusing to let what they've done define who you become.